Hi, and welcome to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. Our mission here at Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live well in spite of your mental health challenge by sharing insights through interviews, practical tools for living well, encouragement, and courage for overcoming all from a Christian perspective. And now, here's your host, Pastor Brad Hoefs.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. I'm Pastor Brad Hoefs, your host, and our purpose here at Fresh Hope is to empower you to live a full and rich life in spite of having a mental health diagnosis, or maybe you love somebody who has a mental health diagnosis. That's why we're here, and that's what we're about. As you well know, I like to interview people, and today I have with me Mike Jacquart from Wisconsin. And Mike is an author, and he's got a new book out, and we're going to talk about that today. So welcome, Mike. I'm glad you're with me.
Yeah, thank you, Pastor Brad. Thank you for having me on today.
You bet, you bet. So tell us the name of your book and what your book is about.
The book is called Climbing Out of Darkness, a personal journey into mental wellness. And the purpose of my book is it's written in kind of a memoir type fashion. It kind of traces my beginnings to the problems I had in school, which were no doubt due to some behavioral health issues, but particularly in the working world. And there's clinical observations throughout. It's not written in as a clinical book, but it has the some observations from a clinician. And the idea is to give the reader an idea just how much mental health really does impact our everyday life. It's not like we just we're in the blues once in a while and that's that. It had a major impact on my life.
Can you tell me about that impact? Can you give me a couple of examples what that was like for you?
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of problems in the working world. I lost a number of jobs, and I looked, and as God led me back through my journey, I could see where I couldn't blame the employer. I was blaming them for all my past jobs. In reality, I was taking my depression and my anxiety and my other issues with me from job to job, so that sure, in the beginning, I did fine on the job, but as I was there longer, these problems raised their ugly head again. Problems concentrating, problems staying focused. That's about the same thing. Just problems with depression, which sap the energy out of us. And on a fast-paced job, I was in publishing for a long time. It can be hard enough even when you're really with it, you're really on your game every day. And when you're having depression issues, it's that much harder to stick with it. And
it's kind of like being stuck in molasses and the rest of the world's not in molasses, and you're just trying to push through and kind of lethargically getting things done, if you're getting them done.
That's exactly right. That's a very good way of putting it. That's exactly what happens.
Yeah. So the book shows then how you got to the point of becoming well, correct?
Right. It goes through a couple different stages. That's why it's called Climbing Out of Darkness and not Climbing Out of the Darkness, which my wife correctly told me would be more like you climbed out of it once, and I didn't. I climbed out of it a few different occasions, and it goes back to the beginning of my life because I had some mental health issues growing up a little bit, like a number of people I've talked to. Nothing really terrible, but there was mental health problems on my dad's side of the family.
Sure.
So some of this was genetic. So I needed to go over my beginning. I had I just so I had some problems on a few different occasions so I had to go back and kind of retrace, and some steps were worse than others. The worst was probably in 2002. I lost about 3 jobs in the span of less than roughly about 2 years. And that's when I finally woke up and realized And after talking to my wife, there's something going on here besides work. There's got to be a reason why I keep losing these jobs all the time. And
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's when I was out of work for roughly 8 months. But God uses that time for good, and I needed that time off to see what was going on. And
So what did you do during that time? What did you go to a doctor? Did you start taking medicine or what?
I went. No, was a little bit later. I did more praying than I usually did. I memorized some very helpful verses, like Jeremiah 29:11. I recite them to myself every day, grocery store, at home, on my way somewhere. I'm at home. Yeah, that helped. I started seeing a counselor through my wife's employee assistance program,
Uh-huh.
and that was kind of the tipping point. And that she diagnosed me with having attention deficit disorder as well as depression. And some people, as you know, don't really like receiving a diagnosis. It's like, oh, what's wrong with me? I was actually enthused to have a diagnosis because I was like, okay, now I got an idea what's wrong with me. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
get through a problem if you don't really know what it is, if you're guessing all the time? So then she referred me to my general practitioner. Um, it's kind of surprising she didn't go to a psychiatrist and went to my practitioner, but that's okay. It worked out. And he prescribed Wellbutrin, which I started taking, I think it was either May or June of '02. And that's when it was like Brad, it was like a veil was lifted off my eyes. And I was like,
Ah,
oh, this is why people are happier. This is why people laugh more. This is how I'm supposed to be enjoying life. Remember, I'm out of work yet, so I really don't have a big reason to be happy yet.
yeah.
Yet, even though I'm out of work, I'm happier than I've been in a long time. And
Wow.
and
Yeah.
it's summer too, so that helped. That helped. The days are longer, they're sunnier, and
Right.
um, after about 2 months later, in August, I got a part-time job, which evolved into full-time. And I was there for about 14 years. I was blessed with a job
Isn't
I
that's a
love for a long time.
yeah, that's amazing, Mike, because a lot of people don't, I spoke to somebody recently that kind of poo-pooed the idea of medicine because it just doesn't work and it makes things worse. And this was somebody from a medical perspective. And I was like, I can tell you countless stories of when medicine worked. And this is just a perfect example of that, Mike. You took the medicine, you got the therapy, and then you kept a job for 14 years. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
That's a
I
turnaround, you
yeah,
know?
I was basically sick and tired of being sick and tired. So
Yeah.
it's like, and I didn't know at the time how resistant a lot of people, men especially, were to taking a medication. I looked at it like, you're a doctor, you know more than me. I don't know a lot about this. I'm willing to try something to feel better. I'm like, what am I going to feel worse? I
Yeah.
certainly had absolutely nothing to lose. So um, I was on board with it. I had no problem with trying something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
If you
it
got
talked to
bad, if you
me
got
of
bad if you got bad headaches and they tell you to take a pill for because you got a migraine, I mean, why not? I mean, it's the same
yeah,
thing.
why would you not do it? Yeah.
Mhm.
Talk to me about men and mental health issues. Um, because it seems like more and more I'm having more conversations with men about the fact that many times men are suffering needlessly because they are hesitant to get help or resistant to taking medicine, like you just mentioned. Talk
Mhm.
talk to me about that. What are some of your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, I've got some pretty macho friends who are who they don't know it, but they're helping me with content behind the scenes with some of their remarks and stuff. I think a big part of it, Brad, is denial. They just deny that they've got an issue. They just think, well, that's just me, that's who I am. If you don't like it, lump it,
Yeah,
that's a pretty good part of it. Another thing I'm finding out through some other people is in the mental health field, there needs to be some reframing of some of these questions. And mental health, that turns some people off. Mental illness really turns people off. I'm not that bad. Depression, well, I'm not depressed, and they don't understand what clinical depression is. So what I think would be really helpful going forward, and again, this is something I've been learning from some other people, is to start reframing these things, start getting at the root of these person's problems. And you're like, what's bothering you at work? Well, what will a man talk about? You'll probably talk about stress. You might talk about family responsibilities, how hard it is on the job, and then use that as an open door to start asking more questions that probe at how they're doing mentally without maybe they're realizing it. And even in the more traditional medical settings, I've run into some of that of late. Excuse me. I was having some physical pain last year. I had a lot of problems with my pain and shoulder. I went to a number of different doctors. Anyway, the one gal, she asked me how this was affecting my mental health. How did I feel now compared to like 2 or 3 weeks ago? Did I have any thoughts of self-harm? Did I, it was just like a real basic questionnaire. There's a name for it, Q9 or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But so I think there has been inroads to where the medical profession is slowly but surely understanding these things do interrelate, and we better start asking more questions about what's going on in that realm and not just the physical realm.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Mike, what would you say to somebody that would be listening that's a man? And maybe how would you describe depression? What would you encourage him to do?
Uh, how often are you experiencing the depression? We all experience blues from time to time. No doubt about that. Life can be tough, as you state correctly in your book. No doubt about it. We all go through something. How often do you feel like this way? How does it affect your everyday life? Are you happy if you're married? Are your spouse happy with you? How do you feel? How are you handling stress? Um, what's your mood like? Are you usually kind of melancholy would be too strong of a word, but how do you usually feel, and try to get at that sort of thing, and just kind of reiterating the persistency of it, because as a lot of times one of the definitions of some of these disorders is how long this has been going on, and that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
So I would definitely want to get at you know how do they feel the majority of the time, not you're having a rough day, but the majority of the time.
Right. And, I think it's important to say that with depression in men, there's two things that I found surprising when I really was clinically depressed for a long period of time, was the fact that depression, I did not feel sad. I didn't feel anything. I was just numb. And the other thing is that depression sometimes shows up in men through anger. And we're more likely to become angry when we're depressed, or more angry than usual, or whatever.
Very, very good point. Very good point. And well, both those points are, yeah, flat feelings. I had that a lot on one of my jobs, and that I had lost. And I'm sure everybody else there seemed upbeat. And I'm depressed without really knowing it. I'm not motivated. Motivation that you want to ask them how motivated they are on the job.
Yeah.
You want to ask that. You want to
Yep.
see if you can get at some flat feelings, because like you say, that's right. You don't always feel necessarily sad, and I think that's a big misnomer of these things. They think, I'm not that sad. I don't know
Yeah.
if I even am sad. There's more to it than that. It's a lack of energy, for one thing. We talk a lot in my support group about how some of us just struggle to have enough energy to get through the day sometimes. So energy could be an opening with some men, if they're like, oh, I'm always tired. I don't know why I shouldn't be tired. I sleep every night. So
Right.
there's energy, there's flat feelings, there's anger. A friend of mine, there's self-medication. A friend of mine even jokes about it, like, oh, I'll have a couple drinks tonight and self-medicate myself. And
Yeah.
it's like, and I did come about close to tell him, well, that's nice, but this isn't really funny,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, how can people get a hold of your book, Mike? How can they get a copy of it?
Well, it's available on Amazon. Again, the title is Climbing Out of Darkness, A Personal Journey into Mental Wellness. Uh, Marina London, who is a licensed clinical social worker, assisted me on it. Her name also appears on the cover. And you can also write to me, and I will send you a signed, personalized copy. And
How do people write to you? What's your email address?
my email address is madjack, MADJAC, at tds.net. That's my email address. And the cost for me to ship a book is roughly about the same as getting it on Amazon, but of course you're not going to get a signed copy on Amazon. So
Right, right. So, folks, especially if you're a man and you potentially are um, experiencing depression or have, I would recommend that you pick a copy of this book up. And Mike, what would you say to any wives that might be listening and they know their husband is not doing well, but the husband is not real open to getting help or to reading a book? What words of encouragement or insights might you be able to give to them?
well, look at how far I've come. Hopefully that would be a way of getting at it. There's also a couple of side stories within this book, from a couple other people, a couple other men who've had self problems in this area, who approached the problem a little bit differently than what I did. So there isn't necessarily a right or a wrong way of doing it, but it also offers some insight. For example, one gentleman, it took me many years before I started getting the therapy route of it. But another gentleman, he did the opposite. He was very leery about taking the medication, but he was very willing to undergo therapy. So he went that route for quite a while before he got into um, the medication part of it. Another gentleman had some problems with both, but in all cases, you could see where it was holding them back in life. So
Yeah,
I think a good approach might be something, we're kind of wired to be, breadwinners and successful in careers and stuff. I'd say, well, how is your husband doing in his career or on the job? Is he doing as well as he could be? Could he be doing better? Would he like to be doing better? Is he motivated on his job? If he's not motivated on his job, why isn't he motivated? Sometimes we think it's just the job, like I did for years, when, like I say, in reality, I was bringing the depression with me from job to job.
sure.
Why go through so much trial and error like I did? Seek seek help. And if you find out you don't have a mental health condition, fine. But find out what the answer. Look into it. If you have a sore shoulder, you wouldn't not want to get it looked at some point, right? If you
Right.
busted your ankle, you wouldn't want to not get it looked at, right?
Yep.
So if you have something going on, or you even think that you might have something going on, check it out. What
Yep.
what can it hurt?
Yep. Well, Mike, I thank you so much for being with me today. And I'm hopeful that this podcast will be heard by many and that they'll pick up your book. So it's say the title, the first part of the title again.
Right. Uh, Climbing Out of Darkness.
Climbing Out of Darkness. And so you can look that up on Amazon, order it, or you can email Mike and he'll be happy to get you a copy of that, signed a copy. There you go. So thank you so much, Mike, for being here today. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it.
You bet. Well, my friends, that concludes this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. If you are listening to this on iTunes, if you'd give an honest review or comments, that helps other people find it on iTunes. I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at pastorbrad@freshhope.us. Maybe you've got a question, insights, or maybe you've got ideas of who I could interview, or maybe even you're interested in being on the podcast. So, if you need something or whatever, reach out to us at Fresh Hope. We're here to help you. We want to help empower you to live well in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. Once again, I'm Brad Hoefs, your host, and this has been another edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. Hold fast, my friend. There is hope.
You've been listening to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. If you have an opportunity, please review, share, and subscribe to the Fresh Hope for Mental Health podcast on iTunes or on the service that you use. We encourage you to share our podcast on social media with your friends and family. Previous podcasts of Fresh Hope for Mental Health can be found at freshhopeformentalhealth.com, iHeartRadio, Stitcher Radio, and iTunes. Fresh Hope is one of the leading networks of faith-based peer support groups internationally. For more information about Fresh Hope, go to freshhope.us.